Thank you, folks. Welcome to the Customary Use Committee meeting. We'll call it to order at this time, and I will observe that it's January the 30th. It's about 5:01 p.m. I note that we not only have a quorum, we have a full complement of the committee is here today. So please turn off your cell phones. To get rid of all conversation about my scar, the guy said, "Shut up." I thought he said, "Stand up." No, that isn't what happened. I had a little cancer removed there. It wasn't melanoma, and they got it all. So thank you. So we won't get around it. Will y'all join me in the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag? Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We're going to go through a couple of things here just to bring you up to date. We have a deadline. This committee has a deadline that was set by the Board of County Commissioners, and we need to turn in a report by March the 1st. So I'm going to ask the committee to be thinking about suggestions as to how we accomplish that deadline. It obviously will entail some more meetings probably, and I'm going to accept your recommendations on that. The committee will discuss that about 40 minutes prior to the end of the meeting. 20 minutes prior to the end of the meeting, we will have our public comments as well, again, okay, at this time. When the committee members speak, I would ask that you give your names when you speak, because we're recording all this for the minutes. We don't have minutes from last meeting. They hadn't been they've been recorded, but they hadn't been transcribed, so y'all didn't receive any. So we'll defer reading of the minutes from the last meeting to the next one, if you, okay? There will be several dates between now and March 1st, so y'all be thinking about during this meeting, if you will, please, about how we will go about reaching our goal of making a report to the BC by March 1st. Rob's with us today again to help lead us through these discussions, and I'm going to turn it over to him at this time until we get to our portion of the meeting. Thank you, Rob.
Thank you, Judge. What you see up here, they're a little cleaner than my handwriting, what we did last week and where we got to. Thanks for the correction on typo. I'll do that before the meeting. And just to reiterate, just kind of start us in our focus. Remember the charge from the County Commission, which is on the very first sheet there, the purpose. To review and discuss the customary use ordinance and report recommendations, ideas, alternatives, or amendments to the ordinance that would best serve the residents and visitors of Walton County. All right, so that's kind of our grounding purpose for being here. And with that reminder, where we left off was we decided, after identifying 7 different issues, to head straight into the whereas clauses. I asked you all to do a little bit of homework. You're not going to switch papers and grade papers or anything, but the idea there, remember we talked go through the ordinance, the 13 whereas clauses in the ordinance, and we're going to mark in green the ones that you agreed with, yellow you were cautioned on, red you firmly disagreed with, and in blue we're going to have new whereas clauses if we felt there were some important whereases that needed to precede the ordinance, the substantive part. Oh, thank you, I'm sorry. Then we would have those as well. So what I remember from last week, we had consensus agreement on 1 and 2, and I've just numbered them sequentially. So if unless there's anybody who feels strongly to start somewhere else, we'll just pick up where we left off and start right into number 3. The idea might well be, and I discussed this with the judge before we started, it might well be that by the end of this portion of what we do today, we're at a point of taking a vote, if that's appropriate. If we don't get through them, maybe we defer that till next meeting. But at some point, kind of taking a vote on what the committee thinks about getting the whereas clauses, and then maybe at the next meeting, diving into the meat of the issue. But I think it certainly sets it up properly by the findings that the commission is making. So number 3 begins, or says, whereas the public at large, including residents and visitors to the county, have utilized the dry sand areas of all the beaches in the county for recreational purposes since time immemorial. That's one of the findings of the committee of the BCC in enacting the ordinance. Discuss. In other words, did everybody green it? Did somebody yellow it? Did somebody red it? What are our thoughts?
Maybe start with show of hands on each one.
And I'm not asking for a vote. I'm just asking what you all thought. If you think it's perfect, yeah, please. And if you would remember, state your name just so we hear it.
Beth Clay, and I yellowed that because I do not believe that the sand areas of all the beaches in the county have been used since time immemorial. And according to the case that we're talking about, Tony Rama, it says in one of the findings that in our country we really don't have time immemorial.
Okay. So do you object, Beth, to that phrase "time immemorial," or to the entire part, utilize the dry sand areas of all the beaches for recreational purposes? In other words, is it the use that's described or the time?
It's the use of all the beaches. I do not believe that all the beaches in the county have been used in the dry sand areas for any length of time, actually, without interruption.
Okay.
I don't disagree.
All right.
Disagree.
I would disagree with that as well.
I agree with that. I don't
Okay.
like the phrase all. I think all should be stricken out there because that's pretty broad, very broad.
All right, so
And
we're
I'm
talking-
also concerned about time immemorial. I'm not sure what time immemorial means, because somewhere else it refers to 1970. And if that's time immemorial, I'm like a dinosaur.
Congratulations.
Yeah. Okay. And if you would, let's do this just to help those who are recording this. The first time that you speak in the evening, if you would say your name, and then we'll ask those recording it to try to match voices after that. It may be too difficult to remember to do that all the time. They're the 2 Lisas, right? So we've heard Beth and the 2 Lisas. Okay, so Celeste, just one moment. Let me get down to what I'm hearing so far on number 3, which is time immemorial is an issue. And what was it? The word all? All of the beaches.
Dry sand in relation to all of the beaches.
Okay. Okay, Celeste.
Yes, I'm looking at something, I'm going to read this, and it says, retired Louisiana Judge Tom McGee understands time immemorial to be as long as man can remember. So there's a definition of it, and then we've got a definition.
Just out of fairness, since you quote something from the chair, what's your source?
I don't know where they.
Well, yeah, what's your source? If you're quoting another committee member, let's be fair. What's the source?
All right, this comes from a master's thesis done by Larry Jones on customary use. And if you look up, and I forgot to print it out today, but if you look up time immemorial, it says back until nobody can remember. So we certainly have a definition, and I think there's a lot of people, probably some of them I see in this room, that can go back to time immemorial in Walton County. And I don't see how we as a committee could certainly say this beach, or that beach. I would think that if you go back time immemorial, people did not really delineate lines in the sand as far as where they were. You know, they were certainly some colloquial terms, but I think this should stand as it is, and it is, if you look at again, same document, that you know, the state of Texas uses the term time immemorial in their customary use, I don't know, it's an ordinance, a statute, their customary use statute. So I think it's something that when you're talking about customary use, people are very familiar with, and I think it should stand, and I think I don't think we as a committee can exclude any of the beaches at this time, you know.
All right, let me ask the county attorney's office. What is from the county attorney's office, because this would be the advice that the county commission would receive. What is and I'm sorry to put you on the spot, Sydney, I totally didn't prepare for this. What is the legal definition of time immemorial that the county commission has been using?
So that phrase time immemorial comes from the Tony Roma piece. The phrase time immemorial comes from the language from Tony Roma. And we discussed last time that one of the elements of customary use is that that the custom is ancient or from time immemorial. So our understanding is that the beaches have been customarily used since prehistoric times. Dr. Miller, who did the research, there was documented evidence of Native Americans using the beach since at least, I think it was 5,000 AD, or 5,000 BC, sorry, BC. So the idea is that it's ancient, and that it's as Judge McGee in the quote from the thesis, that it's as long as anyone can remember.
Okay.
And Ron?
Okay, thanks. So, yeah.
And
please.
Brenda Reese, I would definitely put it as
just for the record, if you may.
Brenda Reese,
Thanks,
I
Bob.
would put it as the green because it's definitely native peoples have been here for thousands of years, and even as recently as 1528, when Cabeza de Vaca and Narvaez came through this area, Cabeza de Vaca was only one of about 300 or 400 Spanish explorers that lived, and he made it back to Spain and wrote a very detailed report of that trip, and it was probably around September 29th when he went out around, it was called San Miguel, and that was probably San Miguel Day, September 29th, when he came out through the pass around what's now Bay County, and was coming by the shores of possibly South Walton and talking about the native peoples and observing them along the beaches.
Okay.
May I respond?
Yeah, Beth, please, and then Governor
I actually
Huckabee.
questioned time immemorial based on the Tony Roma case, where it says that in several Supreme Court cases we have stated that because there can be no usage in this country of an immemorial character. So therein is where I question that. The second reason that I said all of the beaches I did not believe to be customary and ordinary was also based on this case, where this court holds in Tony Roma that there's a two-pronged test for determining customary and ordinary, and it has to be uninterrupted use, and it has to be adverse in an adverse position and possession inconsistent with the owner of the land. And I do not believe that all of the beaches in this county fit that. Certainly the founding and establishing and approving by the commission of neighborhood plans certainly go into effect where it says this is for the sole use of the neighborhood of this plan. It was established, several in this county, by this commission, and it was not litigated nor contested by the public. And this case further says that uncontested interruption leads to no ordinary and customary use. And it's in the case we're basing this on.
Okay, let me, just 1 second. I'm going to ask Sydney, since she's here with the county attorney's office, if at any time you hear me or any committee member making a representation about case law or something legal that you don't think is that you think it may need some more explanation, will you let me know? Yeah, will you jump in? Okay, and it's not, we're not fact checking each other. We have an expert on the issue from the county attorney's office, and so at some point we rely on our lawyers, and at least to hear what they say. Now, reasonable people disagree, but let's hear what they say. So, all good so far on what Beth was saying about the Tony Roma case?
I think I understand where Ms. Clay's coming from. I understand where Ms. Clay's coming from. I do think that we have some disagreement about what time immemorial means. But one of the interesting features of the Tony Roma case is there's not a lot of definitions in it. And there's not been a lot of case law since Tony Roma has been decided on this issue. So it is something where there may be some disagreement, and it might be worthwhile for you guys to flesh that out. But I will jump in. All right.
Okay, thanks. Governor Huckabee?
Mike Huckabee, and the question I have, we're talking about the words all and immemorial, but another word that I think has to be looked at is the word recreational. If we're talking about the Native Americans once used the beaches, do we have any evidence that they sat out there and got a tan or had picnics? One of the things the Miller study did show that people used it to run cattle up and down. So, I mean, if the question is recreational, can we really show that recreation has been a part of all of the beaches, the entire 26 miles from time immemorial? I think that would be a tough stretch, because even my neighbors who have been there since the 40s talk about the days when there was nobody there. There was nobody on either side of them for a long way. And they talked about seeing, people have cattle, and for the most part, a lot of people believe that, a person was a darn fool to go down there and buy beach property because you couldn't grow anything on it. So I guess my question is, if it's specifically related to recreational, then that's going to be problematic for the third whereas, because I don't think there's anybody that can conclude that since the Native American days, there has been uninterrupted recreational use of the entire 26 miles of that beach.
Okay.
I have something.
And please, over here.
And the other thing
And I'm sorry, just
Lisa about you.
Thanks, Lisa.
Is I wanted to mention that since these times we're referring to, that is time immemorial, there have been a multitude of plats that have been subdivided, condominium associations, planned developments. It's not, it's a whole series of things, pieces of land that have included beaches. And I don't think anybody, if I've heard it once, I've heard it a million times, that it shouldn't have been done that way, but it doesn't alter the fact it was done that way. And those are clearly, in my mind anyway, interruptions when you sell a part of the beach, whether it be, a mile or 100 feet, or it's 4 miles or whatever. If all of a sudden that beach is owned by someone else besides the federal government or the county, then it's interrupted.
If the use needs to, and this goes back to the county attorney's office, if the use needs to be continuous, meaning, as I understand from Tony Roma, without interruption, do we have any guidance as to what without interruption means? In other words, a day with a fence over a 5,000-year period, is that an interruption, or is it, we're humans, we tend to think in our lifespans, right? Well, what if it's 6 lifespans where it was used one way, but 100 lifespans where it was used continuous? You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
What guidance do we have from the court system on that?
Unfortunately, again, there's not in the Tony Roma case, but I mean, it could be argued that an interruption couldn't be somebody placing a fence or, starting to dispute the fact after it's already been established. So I guess the idea is if customary use is established, it couldn't easily be, nullified by a private property owner interrupting the use.
I'm not suggesting in the future. I'm talking about in the past.
Right.
Since customary use isn't already established, does that mean that changes of ownership and use? Seascape is a really good example because it's one that Dr. Miller used. It's now totally private. And at the time when he was using it in his examples, he was actually giving examples of when it used to be used by everybody,
Right.
or at least a lot of people that are no longer using it because it's now behind gates, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
Is that an interruption?
And that's something that's not clearly laid out in the case law, but I guess the Board of County Commissioners at this point has made the determination that the beaches have been customarily used by the public since at least 1970. So the argument, I guess, would be whether or not a property owner could interrupt that customary use if it's already been established.
Mike Sturtevant.
I have something to say. Please.
Yeah, please, and name just for our record, first time.
My name is Tammy Mims. I have something to say. We have a museum right there in Fort Walton, and there were Native Americans here since time immemorial. I can remember when all the construction started on the beaches here, it was nothing for mounds to be just bulldozed over. And so time immemorial truly means that it's been occupied since we were here.
No, that wasn't my question. My question was whether it was used recreationally or whether it was used commercially, vocationally, or incidentally.
They fished. I'm sure they had fun. It was used. It was used. Whether they knew what recreational was, I have no idea.
Does the whereas clause lose any teeth or support for the ordinance if those words were just stricken? The words for recreational purposes.
While there may be some of these questions, no one has offered any proof that this is not true.
Mike, give us your name, please.
Mike Sturtevant, sorry, I said it earlier. So you can say, well, I wonder what they did, but you're not saying specifically that they didn't. So with regard to recreation, we know that all the people that we know engage in some sort of recreation. So I think it's pretty reasonable to assume that people, 500, 1,000
So maybe one option,
years
Mike,
ago also recreated.
maybe one option on that would be to expand rather than delete that. Recreational and
Well, you could just say,
commercial, recreational,
for the
and
purpose
other
of the
uses
ordinance, it
or
could say
something like
public
that.
purposes. You've already said that they did public things, right?
Right, unless someone owned the land by virtue of the county having allowed it and having taxed it. Once the county decides that people can own something and they divide it and then they tax it, you assume that the taxation of something implies ownership. And that's one of the questions. But from a broader standpoint, I'm not sure we can litigate every word of this.
Yeah, this may not be the best use of our committee.
And I'm not even sure that's the purpose of the committee.
Yeah.
Because this is going to require a room full of lawyers and many, many months of courtroom activity. I think we're going to get bogged down if our goal is to essentially analyze word for word what the county did. It was my understanding that our purpose is to evaluate in a broad form what the county has done and to provide alternatives, recommendations, which may transcend being able to go through and do a hermeneutical analysis of every word in that ordinance.
And I understand that, and I agree the purposes as we have it right there. I think what the sense of the committee was, and correct me if I'm wrong, because you all get to control the process, right? Not me. I'm just here to facilitate it. Was to start with the whereas clauses, Maybe some of them won't take as long as this one. This one seems to be a rather nut issue. But maybe we could just get one more comment on it, and then and then we can go to the next one. And when it comes time and the judge is asking for votes on various things, what I'd like to see is there any way that on any of them where any of you all think there's a problem, is there any fix to it before we just agree to disagree? Is there any fix to it that the committee can get behind as a group? Sometimes there is, sometimes there isn't. And Beth.
The term, I agree with time immemorial, but also just checking with legal that the main thing is passing without amendment and modifying. We want to make sure that customary use as it is understood and can be, held up in court, that is what goes through, that maybe the commissioners, a word here, word there. Again, yes, we may disagree that immemorial, or like I know Buddy and Mary and Leslie and Martha, the parents went to school with my mother that you met a couple weeks ago, and my younger brother was best friends of Leslie. So I know for a fact that beach area there has been played on by many locals from all over the county for 60 years.
Exactly.
So 70 years, 80 years. So.
Okay.
On the beach, some of the neighbors around Mike that he mentioned, I know them personally. My mother grew up with him and goes to their church. My brother went to high school with her son.
Well, maybe we could say on some of the beaches as opposed to all.
I don't think we can do that, because then we're saying that there's some that aren't, and I don't think this committee can make that determination. I don't think that's something that we're qualified to do at all. That's something that's going to be down the road if, Rosemary Beach or some other property owners want to pick and choose whether it's their beach or not. I think that's down the road. We need to stick with all at this point.
I think he's asked us what our opinion is, and we've given our opinion. Sure. So otherwise, if we can't change any of them, why are we having the discussion?
I appreciate Mike's comment. We may be kind of on the wrong task. We gave him good answers to the questions he asked, but we ought to have a conversation about just what we think we can do to help make this a more clear document and address our concerns, that there might be a way that we can do that. Yeah, but trying to litigate this when I think we have 1-2 lawyers in our group, but we're not all attorneys, right? So you're not. Yeah. So that's kind of silly. I mean, we're not equipped to do that. So let's just have conversation.
No, and please understand, when I ask for assistance from the county attorney, that's just to get the legal opinion from the Board of County Commissioners. All right, I'm not asking advocacy one way or the other. All right. David had a comment, and then let's see if there's anything we can do on this one, and if you want to move to the next one, after that, we can cross it and leave. Oh, I'm sorry, Beth, you had something in there.
If we're not going to vote and we're not going to change anything, can we at least have a minority opinion or something? I mean, I don't want to go on record as saying that all of us approve of that as it stands, when we clearly don't.
No, and I understand, and what the judge and I had talked about before the meeting was perhaps going through these, getting as far as we can if we can get through them all, and then maybe coming back, having suggestions for any amendments, any change in the language, any new ones, and then going through and voting them, one at a time. And sometimes what happens in this process, in my experience, is that people will be able to say, okay, we agree on this, we're stretching on this, and then sometimes they just go different ways at that point. But I think it would be beneficial, as I understand the charge to the county commission, to get to that pressure point. And we may have gotten to it on the third whereas clause. I don't know. But be able to say, look, we agree as citizens of this county, we agree on all these things. But this one area, that's where we part ways, and we couldn't reconcile it. And so here's our recommended solutions, whichever way you go. County, one majority report, one minority report, and let the county commission decide what to do. Does that sound like a way forward? Is that, Judge?
Let me say this. This is your committee. and you're going to dictate on how it's to be run and what conclusions you can come to or can't come to. And it may be that at the end of all of this, that none of us can have a unanimous vote on anything. And it may be, and I've discussed this with the county attorney already, it may be that we end up saying that, okay, everybody gets an option to, in writing, to the county commissioners, make their individual recommendation or recommendations. But it won't be as a committee, it will be as individuals, and of course it will have to be limited in some way in duration. So,
Yeah, I love that
but
idea.
it's your committee.
Sounds
It's your
good.
committee, and you're gonna decide on how you wanna proceed, what meetings, if any, you wanna continue to hold, and how you wanna try to vote on these things. The only thing I'm gonna do is referee votes. I can't even make motions, don't wanna make motions, and the only time I can vote is to create a tie or to vote when there is a tie, okay? And that's all I'm gonna do.
I
Please,
think
Lisa.
we're getting really bogged down here with going back as far as the Native Americans. Does it really matter what they did? They had the beaches first. So I think we need to concentrate when the Florida Supreme Court passed the customary use law in '74. From that point, you have had private owners, you've had developers do Rosemary Beach, Seaside, Watercolor, all those planned communities. You have condo owners, they were deeded to the mean high tide. So right there, the county allowed it, the attorneys and the title companies that did the deeds, that was allowed. So now we're having to go back, and you can't go undo people's deeds to their property. So what I think we as a committee need to do is come up with a very good idea of what can be done, as far as you can't go back and change what's been done since 1974. They didn't stick with it. Florida did not stick with that case and kept all the public beaches public. It's too late to do that. So, and they've, since '74, they've allowed even more deeds to happen, where the beach is sold to a private owner. So, I think we need to concentrate on how do we make everybody happy in a case where you get more public access, more public beaches. I don't know what the answer is, but I think us as a committee spending time on what the Native Americans did or when they had the beaches is a waste of everybody's time.
Okay, let me hear from Sydney real quick.
Yeah, just real quick. I did want to state, and I understand what Ms. Foster's saying. I think that's a fair point. But the doctrine of customary use does not change title to any of the properties on the beach. It's a doctrine which allows the public to have reasonable use of the beach for recreation. It does not change the fact that Rosemary still owns to the mean high water line, and Governor Huckabee does, and everyone else. It's a legal doctrine for public to access the beach.
All right, so the doctrine doesn't change title.
Right.
Does it work the other way? Does title change the doctrine?
I don't believe so, no.
Okay.
But Rob, I think the question comes to access. None of us, I don't think anybody has denied that people have access to the beach, whether to transverse back and forth, to go across it. The question is, are there any limitations? To say that people can use the beach, how many people? 300? Can a fraternity have a party and have a kegger down on the beach that somebody really isn't happy about? How loud can their music be? So the question is not just a matter of access, which I don't know has even been argued. I've not heard anyone on the committee or even anyone in the public argue that there should be a restriction to the access of the beach area. The question is it unrestricted access to the entire beach, including that which is, by the county's own definition, privately owned?
Okay. If you're all right, I want to explore this a little bit. I hope you don't think we're recreating the wheel, but I think these are some important comments to hear. And, Celeste?
Yeah, this isn't the first time I'm hearing this, is there seems to be a confusion about the customary use ordinance and the other ordinance that we're not charged with changing is the beach activities ordinance. And I think a lot of the concerns of the property owners really need to be addressed in the beach activity ordinance, because this is just the use of it. What the use is all seems to be in the beach activity ordinance, which I've got a copy, and I'm sure it's 22 pages. So I think that may be where some of these concerns need to be addressed, and I don't know whether the county is doing that or not.
And we had some discussion about this last week, about the difference between access and behavior. Can we focus, can those be divorced, in other words? Can we focus strictly on access without focusing on behavior?
Yeah.
In other words, one is more, I don't want to say theory, because access, as soon as somebody takes a step, I consider that behavior, all right? When somebody thinks about it, that's theory. So in theory, if everybody has access, that's one ordinance, and taking a step in what you do, whether you have a kegger or you go for a stroll, that's behavior. And those go hand in hand or no?
Well, this, again, there's two ordinances that the county has, and there's the customary use ordinance, which that's what this committee was charged with exploring.
Correct.
And then there's a 22-page beach activities ordinance. And nobody said that we were going to be, discussing that. Now, if we want to, we certainly can, but it's going to take a whole lot longer.
No, I think that's beyond the purview of the committee.
Okay, well, then there you go. We're not here to discuss beach activities. We're here to discuss the customary use. Now, what you're saying is, and I keep hearing, all the complaints I hear from beachfront property owners are issues of use. Might be a couple of just, they don't want nobody there no matter what, but, that's where I think we need to refocus on this document and not try to blend it in with the beach activities, even though I do have some suggestions about part of this and beach activities.
Okay. David, Tammy? Yes. David?
I'm going to do this in the reverse order of the way things have been mentioned. In other words, most recent first. David Bailey. I guess I respectfully disagree, because the ordinance that we're looking at, Chapter 23, describes in some detail what the public may do, and it describes in some detail what the private property owner may not do. And that's one of my concerns, is that it's a very lopsided ordinance, because it doesn't say what private property owners may do, nor what the public may not do. So the ordinance as drafted does include what a certain group may do and what another group may not do.
Well, I would assume that the beachfront property owners are part of the public that has the customary use, and they can do, they're governed by their activities. I would assume, unless it's otherwise deemed in the beach activities ordinance, are governed the same. And maybe there is some differences, but I have not read all these 22 pages and put them to memory. But I just still see the conflict here, where we're trying to discuss beach activities under customary use, and I think we need to focus on customary use. And
well, now, if I may just point out, on the whereas clause that started this evening's discussion, activities were expressly mentioned, recreational purposes.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so I mean, it's germane to the discussion, I think, even though amending, which one is it, 2016-24, the activities ordinance, that's beyond the purview of the committee. So maybe we're getting into the activities because the county commission put it in the whereas. Let me finish with David and Tammy, one or two comments, and then I either want to get some consensus on changes here, or we bookmark this one and go to the others, because I think some of the others we might be able to knock off fairly quickly, but we'll see.
David? I have one other,
please.
I'll use slightly strong language, an objection. Ms. Rees made, and again, I respectfully disagree with Ms. Rees' suggestion that we focus on making this ordinance constitutional. I have a great concern about that. As I stated previously, I do represent a group that in the capacity as town manager, not an attorney, that has sued Walton County because we believe the ordinance was adopted improperly.
Right.
So I'm concerned about participating in anything that attempts to make it constitutional. That may be why I'm quiet sometimes.
You mean conflict of interest kind of thing you're worried about?
Well, I'm just,
Is that what he means?
I don't want to be asked to do something that's in direct conflict with a position that my employer holds. Now, I'm also sitting here, and this is my next comment, has to do with, I think, the long game, which is we'll let the courts decide, in my opinion, whether it was adopted properly or not, and that's in process. But that our community would derive great benefit if we talk more generally about what the problem is that led to the adoption of this ordinance, and it may be, I hope that we get to talk about that very basic question, and that if we then can define some ideas about how that problem, once we've defined it, might be solved in a less confrontational manner. And as I stated previously, as a beachgoer, father, surfer, all those things, I would love for the public, myself included, to have greater access and a higher quality of access to some areas of beach. I think we have a wonderful base, but I think we could do better, and I think I believe that would be the long-term benefit that this committee can offer to the community.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, Tammy?
Get back to Celeste. And you said to go back to Tammy Mims, to go back to 1974 in March, the Supreme Court of Florida, per them, they put, no part of Florida is more exclusively hers nor more properly utilized by her people than her beaches. And the right of public access to and enjoyment of Floridians' oceans and beaches has long been recognized by this court. And that was in 1974. That was getting back to your remark, with all due respect.
Okay.
And since that was addressed, I would like to just say.
Okay, yeah, please, and then
I
Lisa,
don't have
and then I'm going to ask if anybody who has had, concerns or objection to language has any recommendations for improving that language.
And
if we don't get any, then we'll just have to leave that one and go on to the next.
And I like David too, by the way.
Okay.
We've met before on other things, actually. But I don't have a lawyer prompting me or like another in between meetings or whatever. This is just from my own work on this. But just to go back again, that most of this ordinance to me could probably just be thrown out. I think our task is to give the county commissioners passed a customary use ordinance, and how can we help them with that, our opinion on it, and it's so that it can go forward with the least amount of modification and changes as it might go forward to the Florida State Supreme Court or the United States Supreme Court. A lot of it I have redlined because it seems it goes outside what the customary use would best be written up as. Very simple.
Okay. And, and just a reminder, this ordinance was passed, and absent judicial intervention, this ordinance takes effect April 1st of 2017. So if there's a way to make it, I think, better, was part of the goals, not necessarily, they don't qualitative, but a way to address alternatives or amendments, that's what I think the county commission wanted you all to do. And there may be a yes, there may be a no, there may be some here, but not other places. So, Lisa, and then let's finish up on this one and go to the next one.
Going back to whether this is can be separated from activities, I don't really think it can, for the reason you stated, that it clearly is about recreational use. Already, we have customary use of sorts that the state of Florida declared. There's access, there's the ability to traverse the wet sand, there's even the ability to stop and rest, to swim. There's a multitude of things that are truly uninterrupted, reasonable, ancient activities. Fishing, a lot of those things are already protected without a quote customary use ordinance, because the state of Florida already declared those things. And one of the things that, this document refers to the beach activities and vice versa to a certain extent, which automatically intertwines them. So for instance, in the beach activities document, it basically says that certain things have to be 15 feet from the water line. Well, that 15 feet is the same 15 feet that many of the ancient customary things have been done, is that right along the shoreline, fishing, swimming, in and out of the water, all that sort of thing. So we do have a difficult task to try to define, well, we can't define. And that's why courts, every case I've read, the courts, this is a court responsibility because these things have to be proven with facts and evidence. And the court has to determine, is 26 miles of beach, has it been used this way? Or has, plot A, B, C, and D that were, let's call them hubs of activity, maybe they have, but others haven't, other than traversing. Traversing is very clear. It was clear in Mr. Miller's presentation, and it's clear from a lot of things you all have said, including herding cattle down the beach. So anyway, that's why I feel like we can't just say these are totally separate things.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so whereas clause number 3, for those who were opposed or objected to or didn't like the language time immemorial, any recommendations for solutions?
I like it.
Well, this is for those who didn't like it. Okay. For that group.
Well, we could say since 1970 or 74, whatever you want to use.
Go back to the.
But we certainly agree that Indians were around. I don't think anybody disagrees with that.
Mm-hmm.
We've had these in the court since.
So one suggestion from one suggestion from Lisa was to change time immemorial to since 1970.
We could ask Dr. Miller what the latest date he verified.
I think we need to keep with the time immemorial, because whenever you read about customary use in all the other states, that's the term they're using. And
Well, just 1 second. Before we get into discussion on each of those, I wanted to go through them and see if we have any other suggestions for that phrase, all of the beaches, which appears in
I
there.
really like the word all. It just says beaches. But when you say all, that is, in my mind, opening up a can of worms.
So you would just take out the prepositional phrase. So instead of saying have utilized the dry sand areas of all of the beaches in the county, it would read have utilized the dry sand areas of the beaches in the county. That's your suggestion? Okay.
Because you still
I'll just write it.
have beaches that are private.
It's just a suggestion, right? So we'll see what y'all want to do with it. And then the other one that had an objection to was whether recreational purposes was properly linked to the time immemorial standard. Is that right? Whether we should change that. Any suggestions on that?
Why does that have to be in there? If it says utilize the dry sand areas of the beaches in the county since time immemorial, you don't even need recreational in there. Does it matter?
Okay. So we have, please, and just name for the record first time.
Chuck Schneider. If you don't leave recreational in there, all of a sudden you're going to end up with a commercial venture going on the beach. There's got to be some delineation between what is a normal beach activity and what's an actual commercial activity. Otherwise, you could get a gentleman come in and put a bunch of beach chairs. And I don't think that's what you want. I think what I guess what I don't quite understand, we're going into all these phrases and clauses, and I agree, I think Mike brought it up, or somebody else brought it up. What's the true purpose behind this? I mean, I'm reading this and I'm hearing, well, we got private beaches and we want some public access to the private beaches. What within this clause can we give the public access to some private beaches that doesn't offend the private beach ownership?
That's the tricky question.
Well, I think that's what we need to address, rather than trying to get into time memorial and what's a recreational activity, whether we use all the beaches or of the beaches.
I agree.
I mean, what's the difference?
That's the meat of why we're here, really, is what's the problem right now? It's not recreation or it's not time and memorial, really. How to go forward.
I totally agree. I don't understand, where did 15 feet come up with, It seems like the landowners and the people that own the property, the beaches, they're not really mentioned within this. What contribution do they make to the process? I really don't see that. Whether it's 1970 or we talk about the Indians,
Doesn't matter.
I really don't care.
Yeah.
And as far as recreational activity, I think one thing that I've noticed, and I believe a young lady said it at our last meeting, where she had activities on her private property that were not appropriate, that's an enforcement issue. I begged that individual to call the sheriff's department and get the sheriff department out. Is there, sorry.
Try to get them to show up.
Just hold off, you'll have a chance to talk.
Is that something that we need to also look at? I agree with Mike's comments. You don't want a guy with a kegger down there.
That's right.
So I wouldn't want it on my property. So I'm sure you wouldn't want it on yours. I'm not a beach owner, by the way, but I would be offended, for Mike, if he had a group of college kids down there just blasting away. There's got to be an enforcement issue, I think, attached to this.
And Chuck, did I capture the part back here that you were crystallizing about, is there language to recognize public access while respecting private property? Is that kind of how you phrase that?
Definitely. I think there's a balance between both. And I'm not sure if this ordinance really gives that balance, because I really think that the owners of the property have sort of been left out a little bit.
Okay. Okay. Governor Huckabee.
The risk of being told, I thought one of the purposes we were going to do today was to kind of talk about options, alternatives. So I took the liberty, and I'll pass one to each of the members if you would take one. I have a couple of extras. I do not claim that this is written on tablets of stone postmarked Mount Sinai. I presented it to the county commissioners about a year ago just as a proposal, and I'd like to just share it with the members of the committee. Maybe they can look at it, we can discuss it at the next meeting perhaps. The basic idea is there an alternative to having ongoing expensive litigation that ends up hitting taxpayers versus the county and neighbor against neighbor? Because I think all of us would genuinely like to avoid that kind of confrontational situation where the net result is you got people who are truly angry at each other. And the question that I raised last week that no one could really answer, what is the budget for this? How much money has the county set aside to say, we're going to push customary use, we're going to pass it, and we're going to force it? And how much money is the county willing to spend to do that? I've never been involved in any government action that was not limited by some budgetary and finite amount of money. You can't just say the sky's the limit. If it's $1 million, is it $100 million? What is the limitation that the county is willing to spend? So if there isn't one, maybe we should ask, is there an alternative? What I proposed here is a simple plan that gives property owners the right to retain their rights to the property. Most property owners that I personally know don't care that people come down and set up a chair and want to enjoy the beach. It's no big deal. But when people come and have a pot party in front of your house, or you have nude sunbathing, or when people leave used condoms on your walk down, or when they take your furniture that is stored on your private property at your walk down and they go and use it, or they tear down your dune fence, and there's no recourse because it's, now that you may say, well, that's...
No recourse is an
enforcement.
exaggeration,
No, well,
yeah.
here's the deal. Make the phone calls. nothing happens. And so the question is, if there's, I think most beach owners would be more than willing to have a reasonable amount of activity on their beach, certainly by their neighbors and other people, but they like to be able to say, there's a limit, and the line has been crossed. If you control it, then you can say, that's unacceptable behavior. And the question is there a way to avoid the confrontation and the litigation? I think there may be. If there's not, we're going there anyway, so.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. Just 1 moment, Celeste. And I think I heard, and Sydney, correct me if I'm wrong, I think I heard last week that of the 3 lawsuits that are filed, 2 are covered by insurance with the Florida Association of Counties? Yes. Is that right?
Without a deductible?
It's a $10,000 deductible.
$10,000 deductible. And then the third one?
The third one is not covered by insurance, but Mr. Davis is handling that case.
Okay.
Covered by salary.
Okay. So there's something there.
So we answered that.
Or if the plaintiffs prevail, including attorney damages, then the county would have to pay for that, correct?
So I don't know exactly what our insurance limit is on those 2. I can get all that information for you. So any attorney's fees that we have to pay for our attorneys or any damages would be covered by the policy limits on our insurance. So I don't know what that figure is, but I can get that for you and have it for you next week.
Yeah, I'm afraid you're taking us down another rabbit hole that's not within our purpose. Because they didn't ask us to address their budget or litigation or that. They want us to review and discuss the ordinance.
I just think it goes to the heart of the recommendation. If the recommendation is, roll with it, it doesn't matter, but I think it should matter to taxpayers.
No, I think it matters to everybody here at the table.
Would you be okay, and I appreciate you bringing an alternative proposal and an alternative way out, I think. Would you be all right if we let the committee members who haven't seen it before take it home and spend some time on it, and maybe at our next meeting we can bring that back up? Okay. All right, some more homework, y'all.
Okay, I was glad the county attorney addressed about that last week. It was explained that Mike is on staff and the other 2 are covered by insurance, and so that was sort of covered last week, and just that Celeste clearly covered that we're talking about customary use and not beach activities, and I think that's there's a difference.
Okay, so we have a few suggestions. What I'm going to do at this point is put a bookmark on whereas clause number 3 and let you stew on that a little bit, and we'll try to come back around to it before we move to the public comment section. Let's go to number 4. Let's see which one of these that there isn't dispute about, or maybe an easy one. Number 4 says, whereas the Florida Supreme Court in City of Daytona Beach versus Tona Roma, Inc., with the citation, expressly recognized the doctrine of customary use in the state of Florida. Anybody object to that finding, or did any comments? Anybody have a difficulty with it? Please.
I don't object to the fact that they confirm that the doctrine of customary and ordinary use exists, but I do object to the fact that all of these beaches would fit that, because according to their 2-prong test, I do not think all of the beaches in the county.
And I understand. Number 4 doesn't make any reference to the all.
Right.
So we'll deal with all when we come back on 3, if that's okay. All right? So I don't hear any difficulties with number 4? Okay. All right. Number 5, whereas the research and analysis of Dr. James Miller, as well as the testimony of citizens of the county, confirmed that the doctrine of customary use has applied to all of the beaches in Walton County since before 1970. Is there disagreement with that?
There's the word all.
All right. That the word all of the beaches, is that the only difficulty in number 5?
The only one
David?
I'm just going to offer my standard general concern. This is one of the paragraphs, or one of the whereases, that I think it's a pill that you have to swallow on your way to swallowing the entire ordinance, and I think it's very problematic.
In what area? Factually, or?
I believe factually. I believe factually, I think that the research and analysis of Dr. Miller was certainly very interesting. The research abruptly ended in about 1970, and there was no explanation, at least at the meeting that I attended, of what occurred between 1970 and today. That's a long enough period of time that I think it could potentially represent an interruption. And so I have a pretty big problem with the entire whereas.
Okay.
But that clause speaks to before 1970, it says.
I understand, but what I'm getting at is a period of going on 50 years is a pretty significant period of time, and to ignore it in the analysis seems to be a pretty flawed.
Could I ask the attorney on customary use? I believe that there is some number of years that's like a minimum required of is there, or is there some 50 or 75, or just had a question about that?
No, ma'am. No, Ms. Reese. I mean, the case law on customary use in Florida sets no specific time frame. It's just those general guidelines that we were talking about, ancient and without dispute, uninterrupted. Those are the standards.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Okay, please.
In support of what David has just said, and I'm reading from the Tony Roma case, that the customary and ordinary use may be abandoned by the public. So certainly, if there's no research done since 1970, that could be indicative of abandonment or giving up of anything, if it existed.
And I'd also like to point out that just the statement is since before 1970.
Mm-hmm.
That implies that it's a period of time that is ongoing,
Exactly.
not a period that ended in 1970.
So you're saying that it's at least since before 1970 is the
Yes, I
implication?
made the statement that I've been
Okay.
alive since before 1970.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't imply that I'm dead.
Okay. All right. I'm hearing two bits of opposition to all of number 5. Lisa?
This one
Oh, I'm sorry.
seemed to have issues on the uninterrupted and potentially the without dispute. It may get the ancient part, it may even get the reasonable part, because he did discuss the activities, sorry about that, but that, herding cattle, traversing the beach to get from Seagrove down to what I guess is now Destin, that area. So, I mean, traversing was not an issue, but there was really no discussion in any of his talk about interruptions or whether there was or wasn't any dispute, particularly since the 1970s. So I think those are kind of issues with this particular whereas.
But I would remind that in
please.
2001, that the legislature and governmental bodies around here did hold hearings because there was, at that time, a desire for customary use in the area.
Did anything come of those hearings?
I'd have to go back and review, but it was well documented in the newspaper, and it was a legislative hearing, as well as with the city council. I'm sure there's great minutes somewhere.
The Attorney General actually gave an opinion in 2002, so it's probably in line with
Whether that was it or not, but I just, there was a...
It was in reference to Okaloosa County that basically said this was a judicial fiat, and so...
Right, but Walton County representatives were at that meeting.
All right, so what I'm hearing on number 5 is that some people have a problem with the entire clause. I think there was one comment about the all of the beaches, that was a concern. Is there a way to fix that? Strike all?
If we dropped all, then I think the rest of it has application to some of the beaches, but I know you don't want to go with some, so, because then we'd have to define it, and we can't, a court has to do that. But it certainly applied to, or possibly has applied to certain areas that he discussed in his discussion.
Okay.
Presentation.
All right, any other comments on 5? All right, we'll come back to it, and you all get to make the hard choice whether you think it should stay in or be removed, okay?
We'll let the outside lawyers consider that all next week and talk to people.
I'm sorry, what's that?
We'll let the other lawyers out there that are talking can work on that next week.
All right, number 6.
No, not to you at all. Not you at all.
Number 6, and I don't mean to make light of that. I understand the concern. The beauty of the process as it exists in this room is you all are in control of it. You're absolutely in control of it.
I don't feel like we are.
Notwithstanding how many JDs are out in the hallway or whatever, you all are in control of it right now. So you see a problem that you want to fix it. You see a problem that you like being a problem, let it stay a
Mike
problem.
suggested
That's your call.
earlier that we should do some more talking here and just converse about what the problem is and come up with some solutions to how to fix it, as opposed to rewriting the ordinance or litigating the language of it. Y'all have some concerns, and we have concerns. I just don't hear a lot of conversation.
Well,
Am I the only one dissatisfied with the way it's going? Maybe I am.
And I mean, and again, if the committee wants to, because we're going to spend about 15 more minutes on this part for tonight, and then we're going to have some public comment time, and then some housekeeping, and maybe some votes if you all want to do that. If you all would rather have, step back from the nitty-gritty where we are and have that discussion, I'll follow your lead. We got to this part because last year there was some concern that we were being a little bit too far out in the forest, and we needed to drill down to the nitty-gritty, and the whereas clauses might illuminate some of the discussions that you want to have. That was my understanding from where we were last week and where we kind of started in here. And so I guess what I'd ask Mike, I mean, if you can, if that concern still is there, let's handle it, but if you don't mind bookmarking just for a little bit and see if, as we work through these, they don't raise the issues enough to have the discussion as we go through the process. Is that?
You're asking.
Okay.
Yeah, one of my concerns.
Chuck, yeah.
One of my concerns still goes back to when we started this committee. I mean, we pretty well established that it's not a balanced committee with regard to, generally in favor of customary use or against it. So we know that. When we were talking about how the voting would go, so we know that the anti-customary use has more votes at this table. So if we get to a position where we're,
I don't think so. I don't think so.
Well, we went around the table. Yeah. I still think we would do better with conversation as opposed to litigating these things, and just talk about what we could do to make it better.
Mike, that's fine, and we're going to give y'all an opportunity to converse and talk as much as you can. But at some point, I'm going to have to get concrete recommendations or not get them. Report that we not get them one way or another.
I heard one suggestion so far in the conversation, yours, or I think it could have been either of you, but somebody over here spoke about coming up with a list of well, you mentioned maybe everybody making their own report at the end of this. That would be a good way to do it. A minority and majority. I guess the minority or the majority of the population of Walton County doesn't own beachfront property, so that might be the majority, and then the minority, folks that are beachfront owners, each having their own suggestions. That could be a way to go, and then we wouldn't have to debate them. We could just list out, hey, here's the things that these folks would like to make sure are addressed by the county, and the other side could say, hey, here's a list of these things that we'd like addressed, and the county would have lots of good information. But I think we waste a lot of time when we dicker over the language. It really ends up being more of it's like a court proceeding for attorneys as opposed to regular public like what we are, aren't we?
I think we could make our suggestions very easily.
Yeah.
Better than having a vote. I don't know what a vote is really going to accomplish.
Thank you.
I totally agree with that. I think if we each come together and really come up with some concrete things that will be presented to the commissioners, that's what we're here for.
Well,
but I don't know that a vote is going to get us anywhere.
To address your interest there, I discussed this with the county attorney, whether or not we could come up, if we could not get a consensus on anything, here, which could very well be the case here, that we could come up with individual suggestions in writing to the county commissioners. And he said, yes, that is possible to do. We would have to limit, the number of words that, you couldn't go on with dissertation, 20 pages long or something like that. But that's a possibility that we may, you are the ones who are going to make this decision on how we proceed from here on out. How many more meetings we have, how we conduct them, and what you want to recommend or what you're not able to recommend as a committee. But it's not going to preclude your right to recommend as an individual. And we will do everything to allow the committee to speak fully to the issues that it wishes to speak to, the public as well. Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Another question that I know we at least discussed initially last week, but I don't think we've had an answer for. Exactly what problem are we trying to solve?
Yeah.
Are we a solution in search of a problem? Because I've raised the question, how many people, do we have any documented evidence of how many people have been unable to access a beach in Walton County because the homeowner would not allow them, even on the part that was dramatically public?
And I don't have...
And that's, I think it's a legitimate question. In other words, are we going to engage not only in an ordinance, but millions of dollars in litigation because 6 people, or is it 600? How many people, how many property owners have been difficult to deal with? How many have put restrictions on people coming across their property that are unreasonable? Because if we don't know that, then I'm wondering, what are we fixing? That'd be helpful to know.
I agree that our purpose is to try to make recommendations, and it's got to be based on good information, and I don't think we have that kind of information that you're talking about at this time. But it's got to be good information to see if we can make recommendations that the county commissioners can accept to modify this ordinance in some way. Let's be blunt about it, to avoid the legal issues, because the legal issues are out there already. And if we can't help that along, then we're not doing any good for the citizens of this county.
Yeah, I don't see us as trying to avoid the legal issues as much as to support the public's customary use of the beaches as our primary
And there has
objective.
been, and there has been, back in 2008, there were issues with people being run off beaches that they'd used forever. It has been an issue, in my neighborhood where that's happened, and
But how many? That's what I want to know.
well,
How big
you know
an
what?
issue is this?
Here's the thing, and again, I want to say that typically Walton County waits to an issue has just been, they should have done something and solved it, and they just kick it down the road. Wait. I mean, just look at the intersection there in Seagrove. But here's an instance where, because the beaches are so important to Walton County and its economy, its people, it's all about the beaches here, that Walton County, they've drugged their feet a little bit on this issue, but they are, I want to say, taking a forward look at it and saying, you know what, we've had some issues here, and before it gets out of hand, let's put it into code and work on it. And so it is something that I think we need the customary use ordinance because it's something that is going to be a bigger problem, even if it's a small problem now. And
but is it also going to be a big problem if you don't have parking and if you don't have restrooms that are accessible to the public? So you have 20,000 new people that show up on the beach, and they go on beaches where there is no actual public access, so people walk all over people's dunes, which many of us have spent a lot of money trying to protect sea turtles and build vegetation for ecological advantages. So my question is, if customary use is arbitrarily applied without even knowing, how many people are we trying to accommodate? What is exactly the problem we're trying to solve? What accesses are not available because some property owner put restrictions on what should be an easily transversable piece of beach that I don't think any of us disagree with? But if you have a whole bunch of people who have no place to relieve themselves but the Gulf or the sand, what does that do to the pristine nature of the beach that brought most of us here? Well, and how much do we enjoy it when whether it's animals or people, defecating all over the beach, and then our grandkids step in it. My question goes back to the point, what problem are we solving? Could we get something maybe from the sheriff's department that would tell us how many complaints have been filed? Let's look at it over the past 10 or 15 years to see how many people said, Sheriff, I tried to go down to the beach and I couldn't do it because a property owner held a gun on me or yelled at me. Or how many property owners might say, Sheriff, we tried to ask people not to bring their dogs unleashed and unlicensed on the beach, and they did it anyway and told us to do something to ourselves that was physically impossible.
What sort of number would tell you that's enough?
I still think, even if it's a small number, we have so many, you can look at issue after issue in Walton County, and they get ignored at times until it's out of control. And again, I think I'll have to applaud Walton County for stepping forward with this. It's a very forward move on their part, but they know how important the beaches are. And I'm hearing a lot of the issues from you as a beachfront property are all a part of the activities on the beach, not a part of the use of the customary use. And I think the customary, to me, all I'm reading on customary use, it is a thing unto itself. All of the activities that are governed under customary use should be and are in the beach activities ordinance. Now, I think maybe, you need to attend some of the beach activity meetings, ordinance meetings. I think they just had it, and address it there. And again, enforcement needs to be we can discuss it a little bit here, but we're not going to solve everything that happens on the beach in customary use. I think it's got some guidelines, but then we've got to refer back to the beach activities. And in fact, I know I may jump ahead, but I think the 15-foot buffer zone, which I think is a great idea for a lot of reasons, ought to be in the beach activities ordinance. I think.
But Celeste, if you look at number 4 on the final page of the ordinance, it's very specific about activities. So when you say we have to separate it, the county didn't separate it when they drafted this ordinance. Mm-hmm. They're very specific about walking, jogging, sitting on the beach in a sand chair, in a beach towel or blanket. And I think for many of us, the question is, if customary use was that back in 1970 only a handful of people used the beach, but they used it, then should we not limit the number of people who can get to the beach? Would that not be the logical conclusion? Because customarily, there weren't thousands of people trying to get to the beach. There were only a handful. That was the point. If more people come, but there's not a way for them to enjoy the beach because the activities now crowd out anyone's enjoyment,
But I totally agree with you. I have to say I totally agree with you. I think one of the things that this customary use ordinance is trying to avoid is for Walton County to become Cancun. I think what's happening is you see large developments coming up onto the property, onto the beach, and all of a sudden you've got beach chairs 4 deep. Yeah. You've got signs on the, I know, you walk down to Seaside during the summer months. They got posts out there saying, don't walk on my property. I think that's what they're trying to avoid. I don't think the individual landowners are really an issue in this. I think most of them are probably, somewhat compassionate. Like you said, nobody's going to object to a family sitting on the beach or something. If they bring their dog and it's running wild, I totally agree, object. But I don't think we want to see all of a sudden, I'll go up north a little bit, or east. You go to that beach, number one, there's no access to your beach for the public. I mean, you've got one on one end, you've got one on the other end. You've got beach chairs 4 deep. I mean, if you look at the population density that you've built there, your beach is already crowded. Mm-hmm. You said early on that you were worried about what the impact would be. Well, you've already got the impact, and you keep building. So all you're going to do is increase your own problem. I don't think it's the people across the road, except maybe in Seacrest or something, that want to get access, which they don't have access, it's my understanding. You created your own problem. Again, I think private land ownership, I think it's great. I don't want to see Walton County become a Cancun. I don't want to see 4 deep beach chairs all the way down. That is not what we're looking to do. And I think this ordinance is a first step. It's not perfect by any means, but it's a first step saying, hey, look, we might be overdeveloping our property. You know, let's back off a little bit. Let the guys that want to surf get on the beach, because that's what makes this area great. That's what attracted me to this area. It wasn't, you know, I got surprised when I went to watercolor and all of a sudden, oh my God, they're 4 deep. I mean, look at the chair. How many chairs? They're $50 a chair. Wow. I mean, that's amazing to me. I don't think that's what we want in this county.
All right, let's hear one more comment from Tammy. I know you've been wanting to say something, and then turn it back to Judge McGee for public comment section. And, you know, even though we didn't go strictly ABC tonight, that's not a bad thing. This is a discussion that needs to happen. So please.
I just have a comment. We all of Walton County has to think. Florida is the second largest growing state in the United States. So we really have to, you know, you made a point there, Mr. Trump, and that was what I wanted to say.
If I could just share with you that watercolor you mentioned in Rosemary Beach, watercolor has, I'm not sure where they are in their build out yet, but they have in excess of 2,000 residential units that stretch a pretty good part of a mile north. Rosemary Beach, I know precisely, has 542 owners that have an undivided interest in just shy of 3,000 feet of beach. And I agree with you, it's a challenge. It's a handful to manage all of those folks trying to use the beach.
I wouldn't doubt that.
We spend a tremendous amount of money picking up litter every morning. We spend a tremendous amount of time filling in holes. We try to make sure that the stereos aren't too loud and that cigars are smoked reasonably discreetly and all of those types of things. And it's a lot of work to do that. But I don't understand how this ordinance is going to steer us away from that when it says, okay, all the upland property owners at an individual's beach now can occupy the beach. There's no limitations on the public's density use of the beach. It just says that as long as you're in a beach chair on a beach towel, come on down. In fact, it says, and this is a companion to the comment that Governor Huckabee just made, this ordinance says, except as stated in paragraph 3, no individual group or entity shall impede or interfere with the right of the public at large, including the residents and visitors of the county, to utilize dry sand areas of the beach that are owned by private entities for recreational purposes. And so, again, this document, as it's written today, contains restrictions on what private owners may do, and it contains a statement that the public at large may do a wide variety of things. My challenge is that I think the way this is written, it's going to result in something that looks like Rosemary Beach across all 26 miles of beach, not the other way around. And if an individual owner who has 50 feet of beach chooses to put out a couple tents or umbrellas or whatever they want to do, they can create that density on their 50 feet. Again, it's 542 owners that are sharing a proportionally pretty tiny piece of beach each.
I agree with you. I think the biggest thing that I don't want to see on the beach are fences.
I agree.
You know, I don't want to see a bunch of chairs here and a fence.
Let me take over here. We're gonna do a little business, and then we're gonna let y'all discuss more for about 20 minutes. Then we're gonna take public comments, okay? First thing I need to know from y'all, is there a consensus that we will have our report finished by March the 1st?
And Tom, I'd like to point out, February the 20th, that Monday is President's Day, just FYI.
Yeah,
I don't know if it's a holiday.
I've got that marked down too. Yeah, well, the first thing I want to know, is there a consensus that this committee will conclude its work and have a report to the staff by March the 1st?
Mr. Chairman, if that includes the provision of our individual comments, I will commit that I will have meaningful comments.
It could be that the report will end up being individual written comments, okay?
Would this exclude it from being even earlier, like February 13th, if we get to the point where we're ready to just do it?
I'm sorry, Brenda, I don't
Would that
understand.
preclude it from us having the ability to maybe finish our process earlier.
Oh, sure.
Okay.
No, it wouldn't preclude that. By March the 1st is the latest. I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we set as a goal March the 1st, with
Yes.
the understanding that it could be that we determine that there's not a consensus and that we each offer individual reports. That may be the recommendation of individual committee members.
All right. Does it, and there's a second to that.
No? Could I offer an
There's
amendment?
a second. All right, just a moment. There's a motion and a second at this time. You have an amendment?
Yeah, I was just going to say, it may not be necessary about the consensus, just agree that we could all submit a report by that time, an individual. Whether we reach consensus or not, we could all, I'd still like to
Well,
be able
that's
to.
what he's saying, yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
that's an
Thank you.
alternative. Okay. Does everybody understand the motion? Is that we will have a target date to have our report complete to the staff by March the 1st, unless we wish to report on an individual basis, and that report shall be in writing to the Board of County Commissioners. Governor, is there a restriction on the length of that written report if it be individual?
Well, I didn't name one, but
I know, I want to be kind of precise on this, and rather than going through another motion, if you would, somebody would entertain an amendment to yours.
I'd say no more than 2 pages.
What do you mean by 2 pages?
2 typewritten pages, double spaced.
So you're looking at 300 words roughly.
Okay.
She's
Good math.
recommending 300 word limit on the individual reports, Governor. Would you?
whatever the body decides, I mean, I've put something out there that's a little more than that, so I'll have to edit.
Any objection to?
That's basically a one-pager.
That's 1 page, that's
Yeah.
correct. That's about 300 words. No, well, that's what I'm wanting to iron out right now. We're,
That was just a
well,
suggestion. I'm not.
this is suggestion.
Not to exceed 2 typed pages, single space.
And that's 500 words. All right?
That would cover it.
500 words. Governor, will you accept that as an amendment to you? All right, then the motion is that we're going to shoot for March the 1st as a report. If we can't come to a consensus on anything by this committee, we will do it as individuals in writing by March the 4th, not to exceed 500 words.
First report.
Consensus or not, that we would do that. My amendment was consensus or not, that we would do that.
Yeah, right, yeah, okay, good. Okay, the next thing is, I talked with the county attorney, we can have more meetings. We can actually get a meeting in a week from tonight, because we are subject to publication requirements. And it's up to the committee here to tell me what you want to do with regard to future meetings, trying to accomplish our purposes.
I move we meet next Monday.
Same time,
Same
same place. Motion that we meet next Monday, same time, same place. Is there a second? There's a second. Any further discussion on that motion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None opposed. The motion carries. We meet next Monday at 5 o'clock here, same place, same time.
It was mentioned.
I'm sorry.
There was mention of a possible Saturday meeting at some point.
Y'all,
Is that something that we
that's
could
something you can
discuss
entertain.
today?
Sure. Okay, we're open for discussion for another 10 minutes by the committee, and then we're going to throw it open to the public, okay?
Well, I don't need 10 minutes. I just wondered, did anybody?
I would rather do, only because regular meeting instead of just a quick Monday night.
Okay,
I'd like to do that too.
okay.
Could we do it at the beach?
What's that?
Half of it at a private residence, half of it at a public access?
Just invited us to his house.
That's not what I meant, but that would be acceptable.
All right, does anybody want to present a formal motion on that?
You don't want a Saturday, Brenda?
Anybody want to make a formal motion about meeting Saturday? If so, which Saturday and what times?
I move that we meet Saturday, February 18th.
That's what? Eden Garden?
That's who?
The
What?
festival at Eden
There's
Garden.
something here.
Oh,
I'll second.
What times would be good?
well, if you don't do it the 18th, the only other one, you'd either have to do it the 11th or the 25th,
yeah.
and then we're out of Saturdays.
What if we did a Monday at the beach?
Well, since the 20th is a holiday, it's
All right, we have someone proposing a motion Saturday.
Can I make a motion to change the first meeting set, the one we just set for February 6th?
Yeah, sure. You got to get 2/3 to vote now.
I move we change the Monday meeting on the 6th to Monday the 13th.
And not meet next
Well,
Monday.
why not the 11th Saturday? If you want to.
I can't do it on the 11th.
Yeah, it's getting hard.
Getting hard to schedule now.
It sounds like Saturday's difficult to schedule, so I move that we not meet on the 6th, but meet on Monday the 13th. Does that work for everybody?
Doesn't work for
Well,
me.
got to get a
Like
motion.
everybody else wants to do it.
Got to get, there's a motion to, instead of meeting Monday the 6th, meeting Monday the 13th at this time and this place. Is there a second to that? Dies for lack of a second.
Could we just show of hands of who could meet the Monday the 6th? If everybody's here, then I'll come back. I have to come back. Sorry.
All right, so Monday the 6th is still on the date, okay? All right, so what else? You're looking for a Saturday?
Do we need a Saturday, or could we?
Let's wait until it's 6. We find out what's going on at 6.
Okay, you don't want to make any motion in that regard then, okay? That's fine. Is there any other business right now that the committee wishes to take up? Okay, there being no further committee business, I'm going to open the discussion to the public. And what we do is we consider what your comments are at this time, and we take them into consideration, and we may discuss them even at the next meeting. But what we're all shooting for here, what our mandate was to make recommendations to the county commissioners by March the 1st, I keep saying 3rd, by March the 1st. And we have agreed that we will do that one way or another, either by consensus of the committee on whatever we can agree on, or by individual recommendations written to the Board of County Commissioners in no more than 500 words. Okay? So, we're open to the public who wishes to talk to us, and we will adopt the 3-minute rule. Okay, the 3-minute rule, and my timer is in order, I understand. Can you see it? Yeah, okay, just, if y'all, somebody scoot that lectern over there, please. Bob, you're the toughest. Yeah, why not? Yeah, why not? You're the toughest.
Somebody got bored. Other duties as assigned.
Gonna hang somebody. I think we got enough. It came over here last time.
Put it on the other side. We're good. Go ahead.
Engineer.
I wanted to be.
I think that's a good kind of question. That's what it comes down to, you know. Sure, yeah. But you bring that up in the next meeting.
I'm sorry.
about, could there be a consensus of beachfront owners as to what activities would be? This is kind of where you've been going. And I read your thing, very interesting.
That's what I started to do, but I didn't want to crowd them.
We may end up with 40 different kinds of, yeah, right. Anyway. All right, Bob, it's your show, buddy.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to comment. My name is Bob Brook, and I want to thank you all for what I thought was a reasonably wide-ranging and accurate and applicable discussion tonight about the issues that are at hand. I still believe that the real question here is, what was the Board of County Commissioners trying to accomplish when they passed this ordinance? And I still don't know the answer to that. Comment number one. Comment number two, when you voted on the one issue tonight about a consensus report or a set of individual reports, I didn't hear anything. There was an early discussion about a minority and a majority section to a report. I didn't hear that as an option. I'd suggest that be an option, because if it wasn't, it should be. I think that's probably a sort of a medium position that you could take rather than all individual or all consensus. Okay, thank you on that. I guess if it were me, I'd say my recommendation for starters would be to rescind the ordinance as written and start with trying to solve the problem that you think the commissioners were trying to address when they wrote this ordinance in the first place. If it's simply to give people access to the beach for a reasonable set of activities or uses, I think what you might want them to do, or might recommend they do, is pass either a sense of the Board of Commissioners or a policy statement that says it's in the best interests of the county to allow residents and visitors to use the beaches for the following activities, and leave it at that. And don't put this into code, get rid of the lawsuits, and try to come to some reasonable accommodation. And then, as Celeste recommends, modify or adapt the activities ordinance to make it tolerable to the private property owners who still have, according to this, property rights, although it's, as written, I don't think that it really recognizes the property rights, even though it states it does in one of these whereas clauses. But that's what I would suggest, that you take a look at recommending that they just do away with this ordinance, avoid all the lawsuits, and come up with some kind of a policy that says here's what's reasonable. I heard the word reasonable uses. I didn't hear that defined. There's all kinds of undefined terms here, and I think the real issue is defining what it is that the Board of County Commissioners and the people of the county really want. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Okay. If you would give us your name, please.
My name is Richard Bryan. I've been using the Walton County beaches for over 4 decades. Very occasionally, I might have a property owner to come out and say, look, I've got my family coming down, and we're going to need the space here. And, my family and I, we just moved over and did that. We do live in a different time, as Mike Huckabee pointed out. And we do have people with different ideas about what fun is. We really don't have customary use defined. We're jumping ahead, attempting to appease the majority without really thinking about what it might cost the majority and what it might cost in terms of the reputation of the county. Once you get into litigation, there'll be a whole lot of hullabaloo, and people will be hearing that. And I think it might aggravate the situation. I spent some time campaigning this past spring and up until November. And I spoke to a lot of people in the north part of the county about the use of the beach. And I had them tell me that they had come down and ridden horses down to the more popular area of the beach at that time, and would come back to wherever they were, and they would go down the beach in order to do that. So, in my opinion, we have a certain amount of customary use, and the big problem, as has been pointed out, is density. And that's really what I think we should be working on. I have to ditto what Bob Brooks has said here. I really don't believe that we need an ordinance. I think that we need a whole lot of understanding. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. Thanks for taking the time to listen this evening, and thanks for your valuable time and investment in.
Give us your name,
Oh, I'm
please.
sorry, Mike Jarose.
Okay.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My wife Jenny and I are homeowners in Sandestin, Southwinds 3. We made a significant investment in that particular property, and that was based on deeded title, including the dry sand beach area. Our deeds, in fact, limit access to the sand within our property lines. This deed has been recorded by Walton County, therefore acknowledging our warranty deed in the dry sand beach area. We pay taxes based on the high acquisition price paid to live and own the property and beach. Walton County approved the Sandestin Community Development, including Southwinds 3. Therefore, Walton County gave up public access points to developers, allowing our waterfront community, Sandestin, Southwinds 3, to exclude others from the dry sand beach area in exchange for significant tax revenues the Sandestin, Southwinds 3 community provides to this county. Customary use must be, as we all know, quote, ancient, exercised without interruption, peaceable, free from dispute, reasonable, certain, obligatory, and consistent with other customs and other laws, end quote. The ordinance recites the Florida Supreme Court. You've all talked about that here this evening. However, it fails to recognize Reynolds versus the County of Volusia, Appeals Court, 1995. Under Tony Roma, the customary use was limited to the beach that was the subject of the original litigation. Under Reynolds, the doctrine of customary use must be applied on a case-by-case basis through judicial means. Let me repeat that, judicial means, to a specific beach area. One of the points that was discussed there this evening. In a 2002 legal opinion issued by the Florida State Attorney General's Office, the dry sand beach area is not subject to public use under the customary right of use doctrine until that right has been established by a court. As noted by the county, there are approximately 900 parcels. I was here last week and I thought there was reference to 800, 900 parcels that many more private deeded owners of the beach. The county failed to adjudicate the customary use applies to each of these particular beaches. Most importantly, Walton County gave up public access points to developers. I'll stop. I know that's my point.
Yes.
I wanted to thank each of your time. This is an important matter, and thanks again.
Thank you for your comments. This young lady back here.
Hi, my name is Tiffany Hughes. I'm actually going to piggyback on exactly what he said. In that same legal opinion by the State Attorney General, the case that they were referring to was the dry sand buffer zone ordinance, which was proposed by the city of Destin, which was written by David Theriak, and if I pronounce his name wrong, I'm sorry, I don't know, who is currently representing the county. The verbiage of the ordinance is almost exactly the same as this ordinance, except it was a 25-foot buffer zone instead of the 15 that they changed it to. And this was a point that I brought up at the original county commission meeting to let them know that this has already gone before the court, and they backed down because they knew that the legal costs would be astronomical, and yet they still chose to go forward with it. I would also like to add, as far as our county attorney representing the county for one of these cases that have come up, well, what's the opportunity cost for that? What other job is he not doing for the county if he's busy litigating these cases about the ordinance? I mean, what are the costs to that? Sure, it's his salary, but what else can he not be doing? And furthermore, if the county really believed that this was the case, why are they continuing to buy beachfront property that they're not using to provide parking for people and have more public beach property that the county is purchasing if it's already available to be used by the public? So I'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Bill Fletcher, and I'm glad to see this group get together. But I haven't been to many of your meetings, but I have had a lot of discussions over the past year and a half with different property owners. And I think, with rare exception, most of them feel like Governor Huckabee does. They're not trying to stop anybody from getting on the beach. They don't mind people walking, jogging, taking their dog out, fishing, what have you. And to me, it all comes down to a very defined definition of limiting what you can do in front of a private homeowner's house. And that could be as simple as X number of people per 100 feet, activities, no tents, no parties. I mean, customary use is a whole lot different today with 300 college kids in front of your house versus the Indians out there catching fish. So I just think you have to concentrate on even the beach activities ordinance, and I don't know if one of those takes precedence over the other, the beach activities ordinance over this customary use. But there's the common ground. Come up with a defined definition that gives these homeowners some protection. Thank you.
Hey, I've been a homeowner on the beach, and now I'm not a homeowner on the beach. But I'm sorry, I'm Ashley Iyer. My question is, this feels like it's been 5 years in Walton County. When Walton County sometimes makes a rule or changes a law, they don't think through what's going to happen after they do that. So what I have not heard is, I've lived in Memphis on the Bluff, the beautiful view of the river. They had a public park in front of the river. Central Park, you pay a lot of money to live on Central Park. You enjoy the beauty of Central Park, but the city maintains Central Park. I haven't heard what the county's going to do. You're saying it's not public, but it is public. You basically have said, now everybody gets to walk on your beach. Is the county going to maintain the beach? Are we going to have a lifeguard every mile? Is there going to be a bathroom situation? And I'm a public person who doesn't have a beach house, but I still think what we're not hearing is how the county is going to back up this decision. Is there going to be budgeted money for more employees to maintain the beach? They're taking in this money. They're protecting the money that's coming into the area by making the beaches public. That's what they're trying to not lose, right, is the tourism, so people have access on the beach. But are they going to make our beaches beautiful? What are the private homeowners going to be given in return for losing the privacy of their beach? And that's what I think, as a public person, I'd like to see more jobs. I'd like to see county jobs, but not for people to maintain the beach. I just would like to see, how are you going to give back to the private owners? And that's what I'm not hearing, is how is the county going to back up this decision? Who's going to maintain all this public use of the beach now? Is it still the private owner's, job to clean the trash up? Is the county going to clean the trash up? And just like with the Memphis Public Park and Central Park, is there going to be more police officers? Is there going to be more monitoring of the beach activities? What can the private owners count on to reciprocate the fact they're losing use of their beaches? And I'm not a private owner, but I see their position. It's got to have been horrible to have this decision come down. So what is the county doing to back up this decision? I would love to hear about that.
Thank you.
Jim Bagby, and a couple of things. To answer the governor's question, your purpose is to be, if you think of the United States Senate, you're the saucer, okay? Because you have very passionate people on both sides, and you're there to cool it and to help the county get out of the fix that they've gotten themselves in. Because I do believe there have been some customary uses, walking, jogging, swimming, surfing, okay? That sitting in the sand, that's about it. No chairs. I know for a fact, Rosemary, we didn't, because that was taking revenue from us. We got revenue from the beach chair concession, so we didn't allow people to put chairs. We didn't allow people to fish. Why? Because the owners complained that they were bringing the sharks in closer to shore and their kids were out there and, okay, no fishing, we just push you off to the side. So there have been some customary uses. You just need to help the county and figure out where. And I agree with what's been presented to you. It has to be adjudicated by parcel, okay? So not this broad brush, the county customary use, and here's 10 customary uses and 26 miles. That's not correct. You've got to help the county figure out, because there are places where some other activities have gone on, like fishing or like setting up umbrellas and chairs and things like that, but not in front of some of the neighborhoods. So their ordinance is overly broad, and I think your guidance is help us try to bring the two sides together. Those two sides, I mean, you can sit here and I can count, no, yes, no, yes, no. Yeah, I mean, it's real simple. They tried to do a good job trying to bring you all together. Great respect for Dr. Miller's research, but Dr. Miller stopped. I thought he stopped in about 1980, but he put in his paper in the 70s. When Seaside and Sandestin and other places started putting gates and denying access. Of course, most of the complaints are along 30A, not along Sandestin. Why? Well, because we have an ECL in Sandestin, and it is public beach, seaward of the ECL in the western part of the county. How we got here, we offered at the TDC, remember 2010, if you go back to 2010, we would have begged for any activity on those beaches, and we were begging for activity on those beaches. And then in about 2013, I know when I got there, I said, we have a problem. We know where the property lines are. We know where the mean high water line is. We know where the ECL is. We offered to buy the sheriff the technology to download the data because he wouldn't enforce the law, the no trespassing, and that's where you got the signs. He put out the 7-page document and said, thinking that the beachfront property owners would not survey it in, would not put out signs, would not put out ropes, and they did. Thanks.
Thank you, Jim. Other comments from the public? There being no further public comments, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I think David, can I just
Dave? Okay.
short comment?
All right.
The comment a little while ago in the middle of our meeting was made that regarding pro and anti-customary use. And one concern I have, if we get past the way the ordinance was adopted and all that kind of stuff, we get to the words on the paper and what I think I've heard several people, members of the committee, suggest is our highest and best use of our time, which is to generate some recommendations, try to define the problem, generate some real solutions. I would like to be, for everybody on the committee, if you want to know what I think, I am for public access to flat sandy beach. I am also for respecting the basis of our local economy and the investments we have all made in this, and all of us have made in this incredibly beautiful and special and unique place, including those who happen to own Gulfront property. And I would respectfully request that as fewer times as we can make reference to each of us being pro or against customary use, I think that's going to drive us forward. So that's mine.
Okay. You entertain a motion to adjourn? So moved. That's all we need is one motion to adjourn.
See you next week. All right.
Thank you. See you. Yeah.
How you doing? Yeah.
He's a bigger boy.
She's good. After we talk, I said, I'm just like that. She's on TV tonight. I'm going to take it. Could be there, so.
Interesting thing, it is. They take out, well, the first thing that they're going to teach you is a little bit of stuff. So anyway,
That's my agenda.
when it called in, they said, all clear all around. Whatever it was.
I can see where you're going. I can see where you're going.
Yeah.
So I probably call every 6 months, and if I see something I'm not sure about, I call, I say, I want to get started. He always says, no, it's just about nobody believed in that, weird testing.
We didn't have it.
Well, that's what I'm going to say. I think if he had anything, it wasn't sunscreen, it was sunscreen.
Yeah, make you turn sensitive.
Remember the thing with the little girl and her pants pulled down with the dog, the whole thing?
But at any rate, yeah,
On the other end,
same thing. And those very times. They're mighty proud of their work, man.
We're lucky to have Mondays.
So I don't have to do anything to the microphones, right?
It's not as bad as people think. People are all nice, they're out on the street.
There may be some way to go down. I'll tell you, I wrote a note here.